void, the taboo of all planes. Since its birth, the pace of growth has not stopped. In the descriptions of other planes, the void is the gathering place of lunatics and destroyers. The structure of the void is like a big tree, and all the planes swallowed by it will eventually be absorbed into the tree and become a part of the void. The grading of the planes from low to high is secondary plane, low plane, medium plane, high plane, and ultimate plane. The levels of the void lords are based on the level of the plane, and they are sublords, star-level lords, moon-level lords, and high-level lords. Of course, there is also the Void Master, which has only existed in legends. However, among the Void Lords that exist today, the Void Lord does not exist, and no Lord has the ultimate plane. It's just rumors that a Void Lord appeared a long time ago, but then suddenly disappeared for no reason, and has never appeared again. The Void certainly belongs to the highest ultimate plane, and traces of the Void can be found in all known planes. The most obvious proof is that when you look up at the starry sky at night, the boundless darkness is the projection of the Void. Under the pile of black leaves, a pair of dark eyes appeared. It is said to be pitch black because the eyes, including the eyeballs, are all black. There was a mass of weeds where the eyes were looking, and there was a piece of flesh on the grass, apparently hunting with traps. After a while, a greeny deer slowly approached the cage. Judging from the sharp teeth in its mouth and the salivation of the meat, it was definitely a carnivore. Although this deer is very alert, its IQ is indeed not high. As long as a slightly intelligent creature sees the placement of this meat, it will know that there is a problem. Finally, in those eyes of anticipation, although I don't know how to see the look of anticipation in the dark eyes, the deer finally couldn't bear the temptation of meat and ran into the trap. Suddenly, the greeny deer found in horror that the ground suddenly sank, only with a plop, the greeny deer let out a wailing sound, and fell down, and then there was no sound. The owner of this pair of black eyes quickly lifted the disguise and rushed over. I saw this man who looked 17 or 18 years old, with dark skin and a pair of black horns on the top of his head. Looking at the greeny deer that had already died on the wooden thorn in the trap, he laughed loudly. "Ah ha ha ha, you greeny deer, I've finally killed you. As long as you kill a few, you can gather enough resources to recruit dark wolves, and I'm one step closer to becoming the master of the void. Ha 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 ha. Thanks for watching, please subscribe." After finally gathering enough flesh and blood from 4 first-level creatures, Sartre plans to go back and recruit a dark wolf first, so that he can be safer when hunting. Sartre went all the way back to the Lord's Hall. This hall was built by Dement, all made of stone. However, Demon is considered poor among the secondary lords, and the wilderness plane knows that resources are scarce after hearing this name. So there is nothing in the whole hall except an empty hall and a house. Otherwise, why do you think Damon will bring all his troops out, just to see if he can plunder some resources? The reason why Sartre was left behind was to leave a way for his resurrection, but of course he saved Sartre's life in the end. To put it simply, the current Sartre is an Emperor commander who has nothing but the title of a lord. Originally, Demon still had a 3rd-level army's Viper Lizard lair, and several 1st-level lairs, and finally all of them were replaced with 7 5th-level arms. In fact, it is definitely a loss to replace it in this way. The value of the troop nest is very high. After all, as long as a nest has resources, it can continuously produce troops. Although the 5th-level arms are strong, the combined value of a 3rd-level arms nest and several 1st-level arms nests is much higher than that of 7 5th-level arms, but Demon was anxious to increase his strength, and finally only changed 7A 5th-level arms iron golem. Without further ado, Sartre walked to the side of the hall and took out a statue of a wolf from the space. I saw the statue's eyes were green, and its body was pitch black. The wolf's mouth was open, showing a prey look. Sharp teeth are clearly visible. This is the dark wolf's lair, but it has not been activated yet. When Sartre moved, he threw the statue, and the statue immediately swelled and expanded, turning into a wolf-shaped lair more than 10 meters high. Sartre walked in and saw a hole under the statue. Walking in, I saw 6 dark wolves perched inside, nearly 3 meters in length and nearly 1 meter 6 in height. It looks exactly like a sculpture. It's just not a physical form, but an illusion composed of light and shadow. Generally, there are 2 forms of troop nests. One is this inactive state, which is easy to carry, the second is the production mode, which is the current nest mode, from which troops can be recruited. Sartre took out the corpses of the 4 green-eyed deer before and threw them into the lair. The corpses of these deer turned into a streak of blood and merged into the body of one of the wolves. A wolf howl sounded. This dark wolf that had absorbed the blood light turned into an entity and stood in front of Sartre, like a strictly trained soldier. He was on standby at any time and looked mighty and mighty. With this second-level dark wolf, the next hunting will be much easier. After all, it is impossible for Sartre to hide the wilderness plain all the time. The biggest resources of the entire wilderness plain are only a group of third-level anacondas and a few small iron mines. The upper limit of the strength of the protists of the secondary plain is up to the 3rd level, and the master of the plain can break through this upper limit. Before I knew it, a month passed. On this day, there was a terrifying aura in the hall of the Lord, and the sky of the whole plain was also covered with dark clouds, and there were bursts of thunder. And all kinds of creatures in the plain, whether it is a greeny deer or a python, began to tremble, bowing towards the sky in a surrendered state, as if asking for forgiveness from God. After a while, I saw a young man with radiance all over his body and horns on his head walking out of the Lord's hall. It is Sartre. Outside, there were already 4 rows of 24 dark wolves. They bowed their front legs and bowed their heads to Sartre, worshipping their master. And Sartre's strength has clearly reached the 4th level, which is already the level of A in the secondary plane. In a month, he finally fully integrated the heart of the plane, and the entire plane was truly under his complete control. It's not that Sartre doesn't want to wait until he is fully integrated before going hunting and recruiting dark wolves. But he had no choice, the plane coordinates had already been leaked by Demon. When Demeng bet all his wealth, his plane coordinates were already mastered by others. It's just that Demon doesn't care. If he wins the bet, it is very likely that he will plunder enough resources to advance to the plane. At that time, you can push your own plane, so the coordinates you have mastered before will be useless. Secondary planes are generally fixed in a certain place. It cannot be moved easily, otherwise it will easily cause the plane to collapse. But when promoted to a lower plane, the plane begins to stabilize and can leave the original place. The fixed coordinates of the plane of the wild have been discovered, so the satyr must do everything possible to increase his strength in order to cope with the impending invasion. And Sartre's way to deal with the invasion is to sacrifice all the plane's native creatures together, hoping that the plane cube will show something that enhances his strength or saves his life. If it doesn't work, he can only wait desperately. When he became the Void Lord of the Wilderness Plane, he could no longer abandon this plane. Unless he is willing to be unable to advance in his entire life, he will always live at the bottom of the Void Plane. I don't know when I will die because of what. After speaking, the satyr started to act, and the entire plane also began to mourn, and the screams and moans of various creatures were mixed together. Whether it's an adult creature or a pup. There is no mercy, only killing. This is emptiness, there is no mercy, only the strong eat the weak. After Sartre completely refined the heart of the plane, the entire plane was under his control. Indigenous creatures have no resistance in the face of the master of the plane. Before Sartre was refined, he had to hunt with traps. But now, he can control their life and death at any time. In a short while, the wild plane has fallen into dead silence. And the corpse, except for a small amount of third-level pythons, was decomposed and absorbed by his control plane, and not even a trace of blood was left. The soul was also gathered by him and began to sacrifice to the plane cube. Seeing the Rubik's Cube radiating golden light in his mind, countless souls were swallowed up. Sartre's mood did not fluctuate in the slightest. He knew very well that if he didn't sacrifice these creatures, he would be the one who would die. With the devouring of the Rubik's Cube, 3 dazzling objects slowly condensed on the Rubik's Cube. Soon, information about 3 items came from the Rubik's Cube. The first item, Level 4 Lord Production Increase Certificate, permanent. After using it against a Level 4 creature's nest, it can permanently double the number of troops recruited. Second item, Secondary Plane Coordinates, true, an unknown secondary plane not occupied by the void. The third item, Upgrade to Crystal, those below level 5 can be directly promoted to 1 level. It can be said that there are 3 things, each of which is what Sartre wants most. The first one, the arms are doubled, and the 4th level arms are definitely the top combat power for these secondary lords. Each additional one greatly enhances the strength. The second plane coordinate is the real coordinate. There are 2 kinds of coordinates, one is pseudo-coordinates, which is the fixed coordinates of the previous plane. This is generally called pseudo-coordinates. The second is the internal coordinates of the plane, which can move regardless of the plane, and are called true coordinates. This kind of coordinates is the most precious, and it is also the premise for the invasion of planes above the secondary level. The third type, the most direct, is 1 level up. The 5th level strength is already considered a high level among the secondary plane lords. The general secondary lords are all level 4 strengths, only those veteran secondary lords who have plundered enough plane origin after repeated invasions can break through level 4. These things are what Sartre wants most. But in the end, Sartre chose plane coordinates. The production increase certificate Sartre currently does not have a 4th level nest. Although the promotion of Crystal can directly enhance the strength, Sartre is now a bear commander. There are more than 1 old-fashioned secondary lord staring at the wilderness plane, and the 5th level strength alone is not enough to resist. Sartre summoned the plane marker, and saw that the plane crystal was a crystal clear hexagonal crystal. Grab this crystal, there seems to be a place calling him somewhere. This should be the call from that unknown plane. Satyr can sense that this plane is still an undiscovered plane through the Lord's mark. The mark also sent a message to Satyr, he could directly sacrifice the plane mark, and the will of the void would reward him with 10 5th level troops. Or apply for plane teleportation to the void and invade the plane yourself. Because it is an undiscovered new plane, void will open the plane channel directly through the coordinates, and send you to the place of plane coordinates as a reward for discovering the new plane. If it wasn't for direct teleportation from the void, you would have to find the coordinates of the plane in the cracks of the plane. Level 4 already Sartre was attracted by this reward at first. After all, there was an unknown plane in front of him, strength was unclear. If you have 10 5th level arms, at least you will have the ability to protect yourself. But the value of a secondary plane cannot be exchanged for 10 5th level arms. Although the front is full of unknown dangers. But Sartre is not cowardly. This is an opportunity to seize a plane. As long as it succeeds, Sartre can sacrifice the entire plane, and the harvest then won't be as simple as 10 5th level troops. As long as he successfully captures the plane, by refining the heart of the new plane, his strength can definitely be improved to a higher level. Void will can be teleported for free, of course. This teleportation also means that this plane has been watched by the void. This is the void's intention. If you succeed, the void can grow again. If Satyr dies there, the void will give the coordinates of the plane as a reward to other lords. A brand new plane is definitely the best reward. No matter what, the void will not lose. After Sartre thought about it, he communicated with the void and decided to teleport to invade that unknown plane. I saw a pitch-black door of about 3 meters suddenly appeared in front of Sartre, and the whole door was emitting a dim light. Sartre did not hesitate to lead the wolves into the door. Without feeling too much, Sartre walked in and out. Just 1 step away is indeed the distance between 2 planes. Enough to see the power of the void. Sartre looked around slowly, the light filled the ground, he felt the warmth of the light shining on his body. This is a feeling that the void does not have, and cannot be described in words. No wonder the void creatures have an unspeakable zeal for invading the plane. In the void, nature is always desolate, dangerous, and cruel. Unlike the current plane, the earth is full of life, and the light is warm. But Sartre was not too addicted, he knew very well what he wanted. To clarify, the characteristics of void creatures are chaos, and they have a natural resistance to the will of the plane. Ordinary non-void creatures who reach other planes will be known and suppressed by the will of the plane. The more advanced the plane, the stronger the suppression force. But the void is an expert in this area, and the will of the plane cannot suppress void creatures, it cannot even detect void invasions. Many planes are occupied by void lords, and in the sense of the plane's will, they will think that they are occupied by native creatures until they are sacrificed. After all, the will of the plane is just a set of rules that operate instinctively, and the wisdom is not high. Unless it is a high plane or an ultimate plane, such as the will of the void, its wisdom is far beyond ordinary people, and the entire void is under its control. Sartre took the wolves and began to look for the native creatures of the plane. He had to get to know this plane quickly. Find out the extraordinary power and strength of this plane. As the wolves dispersed, it didn't take long. One of the wolves came back and howled at the satyr. Sartre understood what he meant, and found a village of indigenous creatures in front of him. This is also one of the abilities of the Void Lord, language proficiency. You can learn ordinary languages in an instant, except for some languages that contain magical power. For example, dragon language. Of course, as a Void Lord, you can naturally learn two supernatural languages, Void language and Void mantra. The Void mantra contains powerful power, and the current Sartre can only say 2 or 3 Void words. A little longer will absorb all the strength and even the vitality of his whole body. Through the Lord's mark, Sartre called for the return of the wolves. After a while, all the wolves returned. Sutter let the wolf who found the village lead the way, and soon, a group of indigenous creatures appeared in front of his eyes. This group of creatures should look like a subspecies of the human race. But their hands were long, their skin was purple, and they were wearing animal skins. Civilization seems to be very primitive. The village is not big, and there is a sculpture made of stone in the center. Looking at the shape, it seems to be a beast, and the whole sculpture is filled with a weak but mysterious power. Sartre is very clear about the source of this power, which is clearly the power of faith. Sartre first looked around the village and saw no other villages. Seeing this, he waved his hand and ordered the wolves to attack. When these natives saw the wolves rushing over, they shouted in an unknown language in horror. But Sartre understood, they were calling for people to gather, and a beast had invaded the village. Not long after, more than a dozen indigenous people gathered with various stone weapons, stone spears, stone axes, etc. But when he saw the dark wolf, he trembled a little. After all, such a huge wolf is not something they can solve. The wolves were ordered, but no matter what the natives were thinking, they rushed over. Then there was a massacre. Those stone weapons couldn't even scratch the hide of the dark wolf. Sartre saw a native in a fur robe with feathers of various colors on his head kneeling in front of the statue. Obviously praying for the blessing of the gods. With prayers, the stone statue began to glow. A strange beast with a tiger's head but a deer's body, with skin full of scales, condensed out of it, with a strong power of faith on its body. This should be their belief in God. However, the power of this belief in God is obviously not high. From the perspective of induction, it is only one level of strength. A dark wolf pounced on the of faith. You must know that the dark wolf is a second-level soldier, and I saw that this beast of faith was directly thrown to the ground. Just when the dark wolf was about to kill the alien beast let out a burst of howl. The time is short, it is obviously a language, and it is begging Sartre for mercy. Apparently it knew that Sartre was the master of this pack of wolves. Seeing this, Sartre stopped the dark wolf and left its life behind. This strange beast seems to have a lot of wisdom, and it also believes in God. There should be a lot of information about this plane from it. During this period, the entire village had been slaughtered by the wolves, and only this one who believed in God was left. Sartre stepped forward and asked, "What's your name?" The language used is obviously also the language used by this alien beast. It hurriedly returned, "Your Majesty the true God, my name is Tessis, and I am the patron saint of this village. I don't know when to offend your Majesty, and I hope His Majesty forgive me. Please spare my life. From now on, I will ask you a question and you will answer it." Sartre said to Tessis, "Your Majesty, feel free to ask, and I will answer truthfully. How is the strength of the world today divided? You belong to that level now. I just woke up, and I don't know the current world situation." Here, Sartre played a trick, trying to make himself awakened from ancient times, so as to integrate into this world. Your Majesty turned out to be a sleeping god. Yes, it's no wonder that there are so many powerful subordinates. If you can kill yourself by just one, it must be a great that existed in ancient times. Little Spirit's current rank is Great Spirit. Today's world's power levels from low to high are, Beginning Spirit, Great Spirit, Demigod, True God. It is said that there is a more advanced king, who is the master of the plane and has been asleep for a long time. But this is just a legend. It seems that this Tessis thought that Sartre was a third-level true god, but did not think that he was a fourth-level king. When Sartre heard this, he probably knew the power division of this plane. The Great Spirit is for the first level, the True is for the third level, as for the legendary king, it should correspond to the fourth level. After a series of questions, Sartre slowly grasped the basic information of this plane. The name of this plane is Kangri Plane, and the supernatural power of the plane is basically belief in God. The plane races are mainly purple and orcs, and a few other intelligent races exist. These purple people and orcs are also the source of belief power for many gods. There are now 14 true gods in this plane, and they control the 14 largest countries respectively. There are hundreds of thousands of people in each country, and the largest number is even more than 1 million. The whole country is the corresponding to the believer. Don't think that hundreds of thousands of people are very few, you must know that the total number of intelligent creatures in the entire plane is only about 20 million. The population controlled by these 14 true gods has accounted for the vast majority of the population of the entire plane. After Sartre understood this information, he already had an idea in his mind, and probably had a way to invade the plane. This is a plane controlled by gods. He can make himself a god, control the plane's natives to fight through faith, and finally unify the entire plane. But now he doesn't want to reveal his fourth-level strength, mainly because he doesn't want to attract the attention of the son of the plane. Once the son of this plane is disturbed, he is definitely not an opponent in this plane. After all, this is the home court of others, and he has the entire plane as a backing. Thinking of this, Sartre had an idea. "Thesis, are you willing to be my subordinate? If you want, open your soul and let me make a mark. I can make your strength reach the true God within 3 years." This sentence made Tessis ponder. Letting go of his soul and letting others mark him is equivalent to putting his own life in the hands of others. Reading www.yuyugonshu.com. But to become a true is something I dream of. And if you don't agree, look at the corpses around you. My own fate is probably not much better. Soon he opened his soul and said to Sartre, "Your Majesty, I am willing to follow in your footsteps." Seeing this, Sartre nodded, and carved a void mark on his soul. Through this mark, he can control his life and death. And if Sartre dies, Tessis will die too. Of course, the void mark is not only this function, there is another function that Sartre transmits power through the void mark, but the transmission of this power will make the void mark people gradually eroded by the void power. It was slowly assimilated into the void race, and finally completely turned into a puppet-like existence, controlled by the person under the imprint. This is also why Sartre said that he could raise him to the third level of true God within 3 years. In fact, with his fourth level strength, he can easily be promoted to third level. However, Sartre would not improve his strength so easily. After all, he had to be given some motivation to gradually improve, and instilling such a strong energy at one time would definitely force him to become a void creature in a puppet-like existence. After all, as his first subordinate on this plane, Sartre still needs him to do a lot, but he cannot be turned into a puppet. The number of people who can be controlled by the void mark itself is limited, and it mainly depends on one's own strength. Sartre's strength can control up to a dozen lives of third-level strength. These are all preparations for his future subordinates. After all, if you want to survive and become stronger among the Void Lords, excellent subordinates are essential. Of course, Tessis is what Sartre intends to use as a consumable. As for whether a mark will be wasted to keep him in the future, it depends on his performance. After Sartre placed the void mark on Tessis, he transmitted a burst of energy through the mark. I saw that Tessa's energy was constantly improving, and he had been raising Tessa's strength to the peak of the Great Spirit. I saw the intoxication on Tessa's face, this kind of power flowing in the body, constantly filling, the feeling of the improved strength is too beautiful. But then he got stuck at the peak of the Great Spirit, and the energy stopped instilling. This kind of feeling is like the passionate men and women suddenly stopped their movements when they were about to reach the peak. It made people feel an indescribable uncomfortable feeling. Although it was uncomfortable, Tessis did not dare to complain. He knew that he had to prove his ability next, only in this way could Sartre continue to improve his strength. Otherwise, it is estimated that it will be difficult to advance for 100 years by relying on these believers of Tessis. After all, the number of his followers was not large, and this time, Sartre destroyed a village. Okay, Tessis, how many believers do you have? Sartre said to the depressed Tessis, Your Majesty, there are only 3 villages left for my followers. There are about 600 people. I am the most powerful spirit around here. Tessis said with some pride, there are thousands of gods who believe in gods in this world, and most of them are at the beginning level. Many believers in God have only a few dozen or hundreds of believers. With 600 followers, Tessis is indeed relatively strong. Tessis is in the northernmost part of the plain. There are few resources here, and the land is vast and sparsely populated. It is called the Northern Wilderness. There is only one demigod-level believer in the largest one within 100 miles. However, Sartre is not satisfied. In order to occupy the plain, he must first establish a country as quickly as possible, so he needs to integrate all the surrounding gods. Tessis, I will give you 10 dark wolves. What you need to do is to occupy the entire northern desert as quickly as possible and establish a country. Can you do it? Tessis was a little dizzy at the shock of this question, which was something he didn't dare to think about before. Although he was accompanied by a demigod-level dark wolf, but one must know that the only demigod in the northern wilderness is not so easy to win. And it is said that there is a true in his backstage supporting him. Tessis knew that this was the first test Sartre gave him, and he had to complete it. You can do it, Your Majesty, don't worry. Tessis gritted his teeth and said to Sartre, very good, don't worry, if there is a powerful that can't solve it, you can pray to me through the mark in your mind, I will sense it, and I will help you when that happens. Thank you, Your Majesty. Tessis bowed his head respectfully. Okay, you're ready to start now. Then he recruited 10 dark wolves and let him follow Tess more. Tessis retreated with the dark wolf, ready to start the expansion war. Soon, Tessis, through his statue, ordered the believers to prepare for war, leaving only a few guards. All the rest are assembled with weapons. Soon, more than 200 purple human soldiers gathered. Tessis showed his true body, and the believers immediately fell to their knees and worshipped their gods. My people, there has been a major breakthrough in the strength of this recently, so today, we are going to declare war on the ability gods who have invaded us and slaughtered our brothers and sisters before. Tessus raised his front paws and shouted loudly, "I will lead you to victory, we will be invincible." Hearing this, the believers could not help shouting, "Invincible, invincible." After a while, when Tessus saw that the atmosphere was almost over, he shouted to them, "Set off." The group then set off in a mighty manner toward the nearest territory of other gods. It didn't take long for him to reach the outside of a village, but apparently the other party already knew about the invasion of Tessus. The village is already fully armed, and hundreds of people are fully armed, holding weapons and facing the outside. After all, Tessus didn't do anything to cover up. With 10 to end-level dark wolves, he could already crush the vast majority of the gods in the northern wilderness. Thesis: why are you fighting against me? Look at the number of your soldiers. You have sent almost all of your troops. Aren't you afraid of other gods invading your territory? The opposite village walked out of a bare-headed man who believed in a god. The surrounding beliefs in gods basically know each other. Of course, as gods, they are inseparable from believers. So the relationship with each other is not very good. Humph! Barehead God, don't be so nonsense. A month ago, my followers went hunting, but your followers took away the prey and injured people. I'm here to take revenge. Tessus, is there something wrong with you? Just for this, you must gather all your troops to attack me. Barehead God, as a god, I will never let my believers suffer in the slightest. Today I will make you pay the price. As he spoke, he shouted to his subordinates behind him, "All preparations, take your weapons, attack. You bastard, don't think I'm afraid of you, don't you just want to find an excuse to attack my territory? Come on!" I saw the barehead shouting loudly. He mustered up his strength, the power of faith in his whole body ignited, and the body of the guards of the village was all lit up with red light. The believers of the barehead god saw that the front of the soldier looked like they had blood from chickens, and their eyes turned red. All roar! Kill! Kill! This is a necessary skill for believing in God, and it adds aura state to believers. Tessus will too, of course, if you ask him why it didn't work when Satyr attacked. That's because the difference in strength is too great, and he was killed in seconds before he had a chance to let it go. The bloodthirsty aura that the barehead god adds to the soldiers will greatly increase the courage and attack power of the believers, but it will make people lose their minds. Tessus was not at all panic about this. If it was before, he would have paid more attention to it. But now, I looked at the wolves. Kill me, the barehead god Tessus said to the dark wolf. Then, the wolves flew out and rushed towards the barehead god. When a group of guards saw this, they immediately came to block it. If it was normal, maybe they still have some fear, but now, these soldiers have red eyes, only bloodthirsty desire, and have long lost their normal reason. But they were all just a man's arm as a chariot, and the soldiers who rushed over were directly torn to pieces. Seeing this, the barehead was frightened, but there was nothing he could do. He couldn't escape. Believing in God seemed noble, but he depended on believers to survive. Once the believer dies, his own divine power will disappear directly, and he will also fall. He wanted to surrender, but depending on the situation, Tessus was determined to kill him, so he could only do his best. Of course, desperately thinking too much, in front of a group of 2-level dark wolves, his first-level belief in God couldn't make any noise at all, and he was directly torn apart by the wolves. When the barehead god died, the halo on his followers also disappeared. The sober believers saw their gods fall. Several fanatics cried out, "Respected God, I'm here to bury you." After speaking, he immediately picked up the weapon in his hand and smashed it at his head. This tragic atmosphere infected other believers, and several believers also cried and committed suicide. Tessus didn't stop them, and the first thing to occupy the territory of belief in God is to eliminate those fanatics. These believers are the favorite of believing in God, but also the most hated existence of other gods. They only recognize their own gods, and it is absolutely impossible for them to defect. Finally, following the suicide of those fanatics, the rest, Tesses, let all his followers take care of him. After collecting the spoils, leaving a dark wolf and a few people to look after the captives, they continued to set off. There is also a village in the Barehead God's territory, and he wants to take it as soon as possible. Dividing the words into two parts, Sartre felt the entry of many souls here. One of the souls seems to be a little strange, as if there are some kind of rule fragments in it. This should be the soul of God. Reading www.uuganshu.com. Although the level is only one level, the power of rules contained in it makes this soul no worse than the ordinary three-level creature soul. When Sartre used the dark wolf to hunt in the wild plain, he discovered that as long as the beast killed by the dark wolf, even if he was not present, it would still absorb the soul of the prey. However, this ability can only be used by subordinates who have a contract with him. As soon as the recruited troops appear, they will directly enter into a military contract. Although it is not as harsh as the void contract, it is also destined that the troops cannot betray. Obviously, through the subordinates who signed the void contract, the plane cube can also absorb the soul. Sartre obviously sensed that the soul was absorbed from Tesses through the contract. And Sartre also sensed that the plane cube seems to like this kind of soul with the power of rules very much. It sends a message to Sartre that there are 1,000 more souls of such rank rules. You can give him a 6th level exclusive arms lair. This information made Sartre very excited. The exclusive arm means the only arm. This kind of arms is not comparable to ordinary arms. In addition to being powerful, they generally possess special weapon skills. In addition, this is a 6th level arm. Once you can recruit even a 6th level exclusive arm, you will be safe. The strength of the 6th level soldiers is not something that ordinary sublords can solve. This also makes Satyr more urgent to attack this plane. Fortunately, he chose to invade the plane, and this plane can be regarded as a good secondary plane with only these spirits. The sacrifice conditions offered by Will of the Void are so good that there is even an option for free teleportation. To know this kind of teleportation across planes, there is still no teleportation gate. The required resources can be said to be unaffordable for all of Sartre's net worth. With the attack of Tesses, there are more and more souls here in Sartre. Although the level is low, it is necessary to know that quantitative changes lead to qualitative changes. The believers of Tesses also followed the fight all the way with a bewildered look. It is better to say that it is a battle to clean up the battlefield and collect the spoils. Because the battle has nothing to do with them, every time a group of wolves besieged up, there are only corpses left on the ground. For these, Tesses can only explain that he has already taken refuge in His Majesty a true God, and he will rise up in the future. Their own believers will also become more and more wealthy, and their territories will become larger and larger. These explanations made believers excited, knowing that there are no true God-level gods in the entire Baihuang. It is no wonder that such a powerful divine beast can be dispatched. The gods of their own family have His Majesty the true God as their backing, and their strength will naturally become stronger and stronger. Life as a believer will naturally go up as well. I believe that it won't be long before a sect can be established. Generally speaking, only those true gods or powerful demigods are qualified to establish a sect. To preach, to increase faith. Not to mention these, Tesses is constantly attacking the surrounding gods' territories. Unconsciously, a month has passed, and now Tesses is already with tens of thousands of people. And Sartre also promoted him to a second-level demigod. These believers were plundered from other gods of faith, and they have all converted. Even if there are a small number of people who haven't forwarded the letter, they can't make any noise. After all, this is a world that believes in God as the Lord. Many people are used to it, and many believers are pan-believers. Basically, wherever you go, you believe in the gods there. The remaining fanatics were basically cleaned up. Along the way, Tesses did not leave any gods as his subordinates. Even some gods who surrendered early before the battle began, were still killed. because Tessis does not want to be replaced, he has already tasted the sweetness, tens of thousands of believers in the power of demigods. He didn't want other gods to share. How could Sartre not know this thought, but he didn't care, as long as Tessis could bring himself a soul and conquer the plane. This ambition made Tessis more active in plundering souls and lands for him. Anyway, he can control his life and death at any time. This is the war of faith, there is no so-called good and evil, everything revolves around the gods. Bloody, brutal, and crazy. Through this period of time, Sartre absorbed dozens of divine souls and a bunch of ordinary believer souls. All the souls were accumulated in the Rubik's Cube, and all other souls were sacrificed by Satyr. And there are 2 first-level arms nests, namely the Black Eagle and the Rock Sheep. 15 Rock Sheep and 10 Black Eagles can be recruited every week. Recruiting Black Eagles also requires only flesh and blood, while the Rock Sheep needs stones, these are their food. The Rock Sheep looks like a sheep, but it is actually an elemental creature with the earth attribute, and its main food is stones. There is also a newly recruited Dark Wolf, for this plane invasion. Sartre brought the Dark Wolf's lair back to its statue form. Except for the demigod territory in the current Baihuang, it is basically difficult to find belief in gods in other places. Mainly the other gods of faith were frightened by the madness and cruelty of Tessis. Most of them took refuge in Lam, the only demigod in the northern wilderness, god of wilderness hunting. The whole believer has also migrated there. From the name of Lam, you can tell that he has already realized the vocation of wilderness hunting. As a veteran demigod, his divine power has already reached its peak. As long as there are enough believers, he can even attack the true god. Unlike other bare-headed gods, it is just a nickname-like name, not a priesthood. And although Tessis has reached the strength of a demigod, those were directly instilled by Sartre and forcibly promoted. And the priesthood needs to be understood by oneself, these things Sartre can't help. However, Sartre has a way to solve this problem, that is to directly seize Lam's priesthood and let Tessis absorb it. You have to ask me why Sartre himself does not absorb priesthood. Mainly because absorbing the priesthood to become a is tantamount to adding shackles to oneself, and it is easy to be polluted by the power of faith. To know that becoming a believer in God is tantamount to giving one's life to the believer. Once the believers die, they will be attacked by their beliefs. Moreover, many believers' beliefs are not pure, and over time their souls will be polluted by these distracting thoughts. Therefore, it is absolutely impossible for Sartre to absorb faith into a god. Of course, Sartre does not absorb it himself, but as a collection of rules, priesthood is a good resource. Whether it is used for sacrifice, training troops, or trading with other lords, it is hard currency. Those who died before can only be regarded as divine creatures, but their flesh and blood also contain rich divine power, and Satyr sacrificed them all as flesh and blood resources into the Dark Wolf's lair. And it is these flesh and blood that the newly recruited Dark Wolf is much stronger than the previous ones. As long as you use more faith in God's flesh and blood to cultivate, I believe it won't take long. The Dark Wolf's lair may evolve into a third-level unit. Now the biggest enemy of the northern wilderness is Lam, the of wild hunting. This time, Tessis did not act recklessly. According to his own investigation, it seems that the true behind Lam gave him a lot of help. Not only did he give Lam a batch of metal weapons, but he also sent a lot of guards to help him. Metal weapons, you must know that even the current Tessis is only possessed by a few senior leaders of believers. Each of them regarded these weapons as family heirlooms. Hearing this, Tessis panicked a little, and hurriedly went to Sartre to ask for help. It happened that Sartre had recruited a lot of troops recently, so he handed over the previous first-level troops and half of the Dark Wolves he had recruited to him. Only those new Dark Wolves were left behind. This time, Tessis finally had some confidence. He already had 24 demigod-level wolves here, plus a group of big spirit-level Black Eagles and Rock Sheep. On paper, his strength is no worse than Lam's. Soon, Tessis gathered his followers. 10,000 soldiers, it can be said that he has all the troops he can fight at present, and the rest in the territory are all the old, weak, and sick. This is already a mess. If you win, you will be able to dominate Baihuang, if you lose, you will have nothing. There is no other way but death. There is a saying that the number of people exceeds 10,000, and there is no limit. A group of soldiers followed the mighty march of Tesses, all the way to the territory of the wild hunting god. Looking at Lam again, as an old-fashioned who has survived for thousands of years, he is only one step away from the true god. The recently rising Tesses slaughtered all the way, but Ram got a lot of followers, his own believers also grew a lot. Mainly, many believers of gods came to Lam and were attracted by the prosperity of his territory and cities, and many believers directly converted to Lam. In addition, he used this as an excuse to ask for assistance from his backer god of battle Vas. Got a lot of supplies and troops. Now Lam hopes that Tesses will spend more time on the expedition outside, so that he may gain more believers. Maybe he will just gather enough followers of the true and become the true directly. At that time, I no longer need to look at the face of god of battle Vas. Of course, Lam thinks too much. True God is not so easy to achieve. Otherwise, it would be impossible for this world to have only 14 true gods for so long. These changes have made Lam feel a lot better recently. Of course, he still needs to pretend to be from other slave gods. Those who believe in God have no way to go out, but they dare not go out, they stay here. Recently, the believers of Lam come every day to publicize, and many of their own believers have run away. Lam didn't take Tess seriously at first. After all, how could a new demigod be his opponent? But just now, according to the report from his priest, Tesses had sent a large army to come here. Moreover, the strength of the army has grown a lot than before. The number of demigod-level wolves has doubled, and there are also some great spirit-level black eagles and sheep. Hearing this, Lam was a little confused. Judging from the situation, there must be a true behind this Tesses to help him. But it seems that among the current true gods, none of the true gods has these wolf-like divine beasts. Even the true animal tiger god Tiger doesn't have so many demigod-level black wolf mythical beasts. Is it a new god? It shouldn't be. You must know that all creatures in the plane of true gods will receive information. Impossible to hide. Not wanting this, Lam could only inform his chief priest to call for soldiers and prepare to fight. The chief priest is his highest-ranking believer. If Lam has a sect, then the chief priest is the pope. After a long period of training, the chief priest of his own has also reached the level of a demigod. Of course, the source of the priest's strength comes from the gods. He can withdraw this power at any time. So don't worry about him rebelling at all. With the issuance of the order, the entire northern desolate city began to operate. Listening to the name of this city, Northern Desolate City, you can know what Lam is thinking. He has long regarded Baihuang as his own possession, and will never allow anyone to touch his territory. Tess's territory is nearly 100 miles away from the North Desolate City. 10,000 people marched, and after 7 days of marching, they finally arrived at Baihuang City. Along the way, Lam also thought about sneak attack or something, but Tesses had black eagles and wolves on guard, so he didn't give any chance of sneak attack at all. Lam has been the overlord of the northern wilderness for a long time. The number of his followers has already exceeded 100,000, and his subordinates also have 40,000 or 50,000 troops. However, his territory is too large, and it is impossible to mobilize his troops with all his strength like Tesses. But even with the addition of other soldiers from the gods, there are more than 20,000 troops in Baihuang City. Judging from the number of people, it seems that they are not opponents at all. However, from the perspective of high-level combat power, Tesses has 24 demigod-level dark wolves. And Lam, the priests and hunting warriors he trained by himself, plus the 10 Tulaval heroic knights assisted by Vas. Lam only has these 16 second-level troops. The Great Spirit level Lam has a lot of belief in gods, and Tessis has troops supported by Satyr. Both sides are about the same. The other Tessis are far worse than Lam. But because of the extra few demigod level wolves, the difference in the number of troops can almost be erased. The two sides currently appear to be about the same in strength. As the siege party, Tessis obviously suffered even more. Baihuang City was the most powerful and prosperous city in Baihuang. The city wall is more than 20 meters high, all of which are made of thick and hard rock. The moat around the city is filled with piranhas. The gate of the city was already closed, and the wooden bridge was pulled up. The whole city is like a turtle, and there is no way to get down. Seeing this situation, Tessis was a little helpless. He wouldn't be afraid if he fought decisively outside, but now if this city wants to invade, it is estimated that even if he does, his forces are almost exhausted. The siege of this world is generally to forcefully smash open the city gate, and you can only use your life to fill it. But the current situation is that Tessis's troops are not enough, and he can't take his life. There was no way, he could only be stationed outside the city and take a rest first. At night, Tessis gathered his priests and leaders to discuss how to attack the city. However, after discussing for a long time, there is no result. After all, you are short of troops. As long as the enemy is defending the city, you can't attack at all. The most urgent task is to find a way to open the city wall. Suddenly, the chief priest of Tessis said, "Respect God, I have a solution, but I don't know if it will work." "Oh. Just tell me." Tessis was a little excited. After all, after discussing for so long, there was no result. "Respect God, if we just break the city wall, we may be able to let those rock sheep open a hole. You must know that these sheep feed on rocks, and they may be able to eat a hole in the city wall and come out. The width of the moat is the rock sheep. You can jump right there." Tessis's eyes lit up. "This is a good idea." "Very good. If you succeed, you should remember the merit. Thank you for the gods. The top priority now is how to cover the rock sheep to bite the city wall. There are always demigods patrolling the city wall. If they are found, these sheep will not only be killed, but this method may not be used. So, we have to do it the first time." Others were also opened up. "I have a solution for this problem." The soldier commander also said, "We can feint at night. They must have been very cautious a few days ago, so we won't do it first." After a few days, their vigilance went down, and we were looking for an opportunity to take advantage of the night to open the city wall. Others also discussed with each other, and slowly a whole set of plans came out. Tessis was very satisfied and said, "Thank you for your hard work, everyone, go back and rest. Start your tactics tomorrow. By the way, don't let your guard down at night to prevent them from attacking at night." The others bowed their heads respectfully, said yes, and then stepped back to rest. Silent all night. The next day, after waking up early in the morning, the soldiers gathered under the city wall. This plain was basically in a wild period, and the supplies were insufficient. They basically had 2 meals a day, and it was basically impossible for ordinary people to have breakfast. So after the soldiers got up and assembled, they started scolding the inside, and they basically greeted the relatives and friends in the opposite family. Seeing this, the opposite side also began to scold. Lam heard scolding from the palace in the city. He just sneered and said to the priest who reported below, "Don't worry about them. They can't attack the city. They can only use this naive method to get us out of the city to fight." For the next few days, the soldiers on Tessis's side would scold them every morning, noon, and night, and occasionally make a few feints. As time went on, the vigilance of the soldiers guarding the city became less and less. Lam didn't give too many instructions on this. In his opinion, it was impossible for the troops on the opposite side to attack. The priest also reminded him whether he might be deceived, but Lam himself is a conceited god. In addition, apart from scolding and fainting a few times, Tessis didn't move too much, so his vigilance also dropped. Another night, Tessus ordered the soldiers to continue scolding, and the soldiers on the city wall were also a little helpless. "Are these people tired? Cursing every day, my voice is hoarse these days." At the beginning of the scolding battle, they didn't find it. Dozens of black figures flashed by, and no one found this figure in this dark night. Originally, the fur of the rock sheep was yellow and white, but for concealment, it was dyed black. The sound of biting came from below the city wall, but it was covered up by the scolding of the soldiers, and because the city wall was a blind spot at night. So no one found that either. The scolding battle is still going on, while Tessus and the others are waiting nervously. Time passed little by little, and finally, with the hard work of dozens of rock sheep, the button of the gate of the city wall was bitten through. The formituri, 20-centimeter thick gate lost its pillars on the wall. The heavy gate fell to the ground with a dull and loud sound, and the ground trembled. And this sound was like a horn of attack, and Tessus had already ordered people to prepare the planks. Rushing to the city gate, several powerful soldiers lifted the plank and pushed it forward on the moat. The soldiers behind shouted and rushed into the city. The soldiers in the city were instantly dumbfounded, but they came back to their senses immediately, and threw rocks and arrows down frantically. But it was too late. A large number of soldiers poured into the city and began to hack and slash. The dark wolf howled and rushed towards the enemy demigod soldiers. The black eagles in the sky also began to attack the soldiers on the city wall. Soon, Tessus led all the soldiers into the city, and many soldiers in the city were killed without reacting. The soldiers on both sides began to fight. At this time, many believers had secretly fled with their believers. After all, for these gods, it doesn't matter who wins them. If Tessus wins, he will die. If Lam wins, his followers may run away, but it is only a slow death. Regardless of that, Lam also reacted at this time, and ran towards the battlefield with the guard. Soon, Tessus and Lam met. The two sides met with enemies, and they were extremely jealous. In terms of personal strength alone, Tessus is definitely not Lam's opponent. As a veteran demigod, he has the priesthood of wilderness hunting. It can be said that if Tessus is singled out, he will be tortured by blood. But this is the battlefield, and there are 3 dark wolves guarding Tessus. There are not too many words. Now the two sides are either you die or I die, and the fight will start directly. When I saw Lam waved his hand, he swung out a golden giant sword. This sword was called the Sword of the Wilderness, and it was a divine weapon created by Lam. The sword contains the power of priesthood, which can greatly enhance the strength of Lam. Not only that, Lam opened the field of priesthood, which can only be performed by gods who have obtained priesthood. In the field of priesthood, one's own strength will be enhanced, and the enemy will be suppressed. Then use the hunting mark on Tessus. All enemies marked by Lam's hunting mark will be regarded as prey. Next, the prey will be sensed by Lam within a radius of 10 miles, and the damage to the prey will be increased by 20%. It can be said that a with a priesthood can easily defeat 2 gods of the same level without a priesthood. Even if Tessus added 3 demigod-level dark wolves, he could only delay time. After all, he is an advantage on the battlefield now, and Lam's soldiers have been defeated by surprise. It is only a matter of time before the entire army is wiped out, and what Tessus has to do next is to delay time, wait for the victory on the battlefield, and then turn around and besiege Lam. Of course, all of this was a good idea, but when Tessus faced Lam, he found that he still underestimated Lam's strength. In the field of priesthood, his movements felt a little dull. Lam raised the great sword and slashed towards Tessus. Seeing this, Tessus hurriedly kicked his legs and jumped aside. Then he immediately spit out a white flame bomb at Lam. Lam's sword was horizontal, and the flame bullet hit the sword without the slightest damage. The dark wolf also pounced on it, opening its big mouth, and the sharp teeth in its mouth reflected the dark light of Sanyan. But Lam raised his sword, blocked the wolf's mouth in front of him, kicked back, and a dark wolf was kicked out. The wolf also got up immediately, apparently not getting too much damage, and then grabbed Ram's claws again. Tessus cooperated with the three dark wolves to continuously organize attacks. But it didn't pose much of a threat to Lam, and instead looked like he was toying with them. But as the shouts of killing on the battlefield became less and less, Lam's patience slowly faded. He couldn't let all the believers in his family die. But obviously Tessus didn't want Lam to appear on the frontal battlefield. Even if he was injured, he would stop Lam. Gradually, Lam became a little impatient. He wanted to save his own believers, but he was always blocked. The few people, or beasts, in front of him are not his opponents at all, but there is no way to kill them for a while. Tessus just wanted to hold him back. Damn! 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 With the continuous killing of Lam's followers, Lam felt that the line of belief in his mind was broken one by one, and it was about to explode. You are looking for your own death. When he finally found that he couldn't get around Tessus, he decided to kill Tess first and then save his followers. I saw Lam roaring towards the sky, and his body began to grow bigger and deformed constantly. After a while, a nearly 6-meter turtle alien beast with a sword-like horn on its head and a body that looked like a beetle appeared in front of Tessus. Looking closely, the sharp sword on the head of this alien beast seems to be exactly the same as that of the previous sword of the wilderness. Tessus was a little stunned. He always thought that Lam was from the purple race. After all, he has always maintained the appearance of a purple man to the outside world. Unexpectedly, he was not from the purple human race, but a Zerg with a sharp sword on his head. The transformed Lam spread his wings behind his back and flew towards Tessus. When a dark wolf saw this, it directly bit at Lam, who turned into a real body. But when Luomo turned his head, the sharp sword above his head directly pierced the dark wolf's body. With a flick, it was the dark wolf that was directly chopped off in two and flew out, and died at the beginning. Unexpectedly, Lam, who turned into a worm, was so strong. Just when Tessus was stunned, the other two dark wolves were also killed on the spot. Tessus knew that he could no longer deal with Lam. She quickly prayed to Sartre in her heart and asked for help. Just when the sharp sword on Lam's head stabbed in front of Tata, Tessus thought he was dead. A powerful force came from the imprint in his mind, and Sartre's voice sounded. Raise your hand. Tessus quickly obeyed Sartre's words, and when he raised his hand, a powerful force poured out from his hand and turned into a pillar of energy. Shot at Lam in front of him. Without too much noise, Lam was knocked out and fell to the ground. There was a big hole in the mouth of the bowl, and black smoke was coming out. Tessus was horrified. How powerful Sartre must be when such a powerful insect form Lam was killed in one move. Thinking of this, the fear of Sartre became even greater, and there was no thought of betrayal in his heart. Originally, the strength of Tessus has increased greatly recently, and the number of believers has greatly increased, and there are still some strange thoughts in his heart. But at this time, all other thoughts were completely extinguished by him. I no longer dare to have any dissent. With Lam's death, a mass of radiant light slowly emerged from outside his body. Seeing this thing, Tessus was very excited. This is the priesthood of wilderness hunting. After Lam died, the priesthood condensed from his body. Tessus quickly seized this group of priesthood, and there was an impulse in his body, asking him to absorb this group of priesthood immediately. Tessus wanted to absorb the priesthood, but his fear of Satyr forced him to suppress his inner desire. Without Sartre's permission, he did not dare to privately absorb this group of priesthood. After Lam's death, Lam's followers on the battlefield also collapsed instantly. The priests and hunting warriors of Lam have also all lost their power. After all, the power of these priests and warriors comes from the gods. As long as the gods fall, the power of these people will immediately dissipate. The loss of Tessus in this battle is also not small. More than half of the soldiers of UU reading www.ukansha.com's own believers were killed or injured, and there were only 8 dark wolves left. The other first-level arms are also almost dead. You must know that Lam has a large number of soldiers, and even after the battle, he launched a suicide attack. The fanaticism of faith made these soldiers go crazy. Of course, with the death of Lam in the end, many Lam believers lost their power. Soon, the war has ended with the victory of Tesses, and the entire northern deserted city is in the hands of Tess. The next step is to clean up the original Lam's fanatics, and then take down all the other cities in Lam's territory. Tesses left some people to clean up the corpses in the city and take care of the loot of the prisoners. He gathered the remaining soldiers at the fastest speed and killed other cities. Without Lam, Tesses, and 8 dark wolves are enough to deal with the remaining cities. In a few days, the entire Lam's territory was taken down by Tesses. As soon as Lam died, other cities were in turmoil, and many people began to flee. The original high priests lost their strength. This caused many rioters to rush into the houses that they had not dared to enter and loot wantonly. Many priests were even killed on the spot. Finally, Bai Huang ushered in unification, and Tesses, as the Lord on the bright side, led the entire Bai Huang. His followers also reached more than 200,000. His own strength has also been pushed to the pinnacle of demigods by the power of faith. But the more powerful Tesses was, the more fearful he was of Satyr. He still didn't see the true strength of Sartre, and Sartre didn't seem to need believers. Tesses had already vaguely guessed that Sartre's strength might be at the level of a king. Tesses's attitude towards Sartre became more and more respectful. If you want to ask why Lam didn't forcibly unify the northern wilderness at the beginning? If you know his strength, you can easily win others believe in gods. Actually, Lam didn't want to, but he couldn't. Mainly the of Battle Voss, he doesn't want Lam to be unified by Huang, what he wants is a servant to help him obtain various resources from Bai Huang. Although the northern wasteland is desolate, there are many beast materials, high-quality stone mines and a steady stream of slaves. Per year Lam has to donate a lot of these resources to the of Battle Voss. It is precisely because of this that Voss does not want Lam to unify the northern wasteland, but once Lam unifies the northern wasteland, it means that he is very capable. Can obtain the priesthood of the Lord of the northern wilderness. When the time comes to advance to true God, he will not be able to limit Lam so easily. Then want to get these resources are not so easy. It's a pity that the rapid rise of Tesses supported by Sartre is now encountered. With the unification of the northern wilderness, Sartre also lived in the original palace of the northern wilderness city Lam. This also means that he has faced the of Battle Voss. Not to mention this, Tesses dedicated the priesthood and Lam's body to Sartre, and respectfully reported the current situation in the northern desert to Sartre. At present, all other belief gods in the entire Bai Huang have surrendered. Tesses did not continue to kill these remaining gods of faith. After all, he still needs some gods to deal with many things, it is not enough to rely on one's own believers. At present, most of the purple people in the northern desert have been forced to convert to Tesses. Sartre sat on a chair in the palace, listening to Tesses' report while playing with the priesthood. In his induction, priesthood is a collection of plain rules. As long as he absorbs this priesthood, he can draw power from the act of wilderness hunting. The priesthood is like the authority of the plain, and different priesthoods contain different permissions. This also makes it possible to have the same priesthood. The of S is a mortal enemy by nature. After all, the more gods with the same priesthood, the more the relative authority will be dispersed. After playing for a while, Sartre looked at Tesses who had finished reporting. You did a good job. I didn't expect you to unite Bai Huang so quickly. Very good, this priesthood will be rewarded to you. After speaking, he threw the priesthood, and the priesthood flew to Tesses and floated in front of his eyes. Tesses's eyes were about to light up, and his body trembled slightly with excitement. Although he had long guessed that Sartre might give him the priesthood. But when it really came, he couldn't restrain his excitement. This is a priesthood. This is also the most important step in the promotion of the true God. Thank you, Master. Tesses is willing to conquer the world for Master, and he will do whatever he wants. Okay, no need to say more, let's go. In addition, you are now uniting the Northern Wilderness, and strive to unite the Lord of the Northern Wilderness as soon as possible. The priesthood came out. This ministry is the key to your becoming a true god. A mere wilderness hunting priesthood can't make you advance. Yes, Tessus understands. The subordinates retire. Now Tessus's heart is full of desire for the priesthood in front of him, and he wants to absorb this priesthood as soon as possible. Tessie walked out of the palace, and his chief priest was already kneeling and waiting outside. Seeing Tessus, he hurriedly shouted, "I have seen Sun God, I wish Sun God will grow stronger and stronger, and return to immortality." Tessus waved his paw and said, "Get up, you immediately declare to all believers now that I, Tessus, will be the new god of wild hunting, and he is now the Lord of the Northern Wilderness. You have to promote this time, understand?" When the chief priest mentioned this, he couldn't help but get excited. His own is about to be promoted again, the Lord of the Northern Wilderness. It seems that the honored is going to be promoted to the true God. In this world of faith, the prayers of believers will speed up the cohesion of the priesthood, and even influence the attributes of God. For example, like the of battle Vas, his priesthood is combat, competition, and duel. But in fact his teaching is he is a valiant fighter and a guardian of warriors, he is the eternal king of war, he guides our quest. Obey everything. From this teaching, we can see that Vas wants to get involved in the war priesthood, and this priesthood will make his strength leap into one of the strongest gods. Other gods are also similar in the propaganda of their teachings, and they basically put the divine vocation they want in their teachings. Declare, use the prayers of believers to gain a stronger priesthood. Of course, there are no counterexamples. For example, when the lion was promoting, he hoped that he would get the priesthood of breeding. At that time, use this priesthood to greatly increase the fertility rate of believers, so as to gain more believers. Obviously, the propaganda of the doctrine has not been done well. There is such a sentence in it. How strong is our male lion god, he has reproduced countless offspring and let his blood be distributed in the world. Caused believers to misunderstand, and finally condensed the priesthood of powerful male genitalia, which made him embarrassed. However, this priesthood has also disguised the males, of many races into the arms of the lion god. Can say that the original intention of increasing believers has been achieved. Not to mention this, it took Tessus 3 days to successfully integrate the priesthood, and the entire Baihuang slowly returned to calm, but now the entire northern wasteland has begun to build the statue of Tessus. This is to push the belief of the Lord of the Northern Wilderness away. His teachings are also compiled. He looks at the wilderness and always guards the hunting people. He is the greatest God, and he is the eternal Lord of the Northern Wilderness. Time passed day by day, and before you knew it, more than 10 days passed. Through the Lord's mark, Sartre learned that about a week had passed in the void plane. The flow rates of these two planes are different, so Sartre still has some time to continue to attack the plane of the sky. Sartre's main focus now is on the dark wolf's lair, because he used to feed a lot of the flesh and blood of the gods of faith, and now the lair is about to be promoted. In addition to the corpse of Lam that he obtained now, as an introduction, Sartre took out a large number of plain crystals. These plain crystals are all produced by the wilderness plane, and the plane of Satyr produces 10 plain crystals a month. Demon had hundreds of crystals left before, but Sartre sacrificed all of them this time. You must know that 3 plain crystals can easily be replaced by a 3rd level unit. But if the Dark Wolf advances, these are all worth it. With the crystallization of the plane and the sacrifice of the flesh and blood of the gods to the nest, the entire nest began to have a mysterious aura, and there was a faint sound of wolf howling. The entire nest shook and began to reorganize, and soon, the upgrade was finally completed. The shape of the nest has been greatly changed, and the size of the nest has become larger. The inner dark wolf's eyes changed from green to gold, there was a golden stripe on its forehead, and its body became larger. There was also a message from the lair, and the name of the troop lair officially became the Wild God Wolf. There were 7 dark wolves in the nest department. It should not be the phantom of the wild wolf. It seemed that there was a special kind of army in it. According to the information, reading www.ukansha.com's lair after the promotion still produces 6 wild wolves every month. This is why many lords like to upgrade their nests. Generally, the higher the level of the nests, the less troops will be produced each time, except for the upgraded nests. Of course, the higher the level, the higher the resources required. Therefore, there are very few upgraded arms when the level reaches a higher level. Now there is a special phantom in the lair. This troop is taller than the ordinary troop and has a pair of golden wings behind it. This is clearly a hero class. Satyr sensed the information of the lair, the leader of the wild Fenrir. Recruitment conditions: the nest owner can directly recruit. Unexpectedly, it could be summoned directly, and Satyr summoned Fenrir directly upon seeing this. A wolf howl sounded, and the phantom gradually materialized. Master, Fenrir salutes you. The speech is in void language. Note that void language is not void mantra. After all, void mantra, a language with powerful power, a lord like Sartre can't say a few words, and it is impossible to use it as a daily language. Don't underestimate the void language. Although it is not as good as the void mantra, this language is also a supernatural language, and the use of void language to cast spells will make the spell more powerful. Hero-level troops have wisdom that is not inferior to ordinary people, and it is normal to speak. Said to be a unit, but he can actually recruit troops independently and lead them. Moreover, heroes like Fenrir that evolved from the lair generally have their own racial talents. For example, Fenrir's talent is Lord of the Wolf. Feature 1, the wolves led by Fenrir will have a 10% attack and speed bonus. Feature 2, Fenrir can dominate wolves with a lower level than him. As a hero-level troop, his strength has also broken through the upper limit of the nest, reaching the 4th level. Heroes are evolutionary types of arms. Theoretically speaking, hero levels may appear in the nests of arms from level 1 to level 9. Such a hero rank soldiers are treasures to the Void Lord, and they are the best subordinates. Loyalty will not betray, and they also have growth. Of course, it is very difficult for hero-level soldiers to evolve. After all, each evolution of S requires breaking through the racial upper limit. The appearance of Fenrir made Sartre very excited, a 4th level hero-level unit. Sartre is ready for total war. With Fenrir, it is also true that he is the son of this plane. What Sartre has to do now is to recharge his batteries and integrate his strengths. Compared with the previous biological flesh and blood, there is one more condition in the recruitment conditions of the wild wolf, which is the divine material. Whether blood flesh is still a divine object, as long as it contains divine material. This condition is not harsh. You must know that there are not many other things in this plane, except that there is a lot of divine material. But judging from these divine materials, the value of the Kangri plane is higher than that of ordinary low-level planes. If Sartre is willing to take it, if this plane goes to a lower plane, there will definitely be a bunch of lords willing to change. You must know that divine materials already contain rules, which are scarce in many other planes. So every such letter the plane dominated by God is a big piece of fat for the Void Lord. Sartre knew that there is a high plane called Faerun, and this plane is a world dominated by belief in gods. I don't know how the plane coordinates leaked. Attracted the attention of a large number of Void Lords. It is said that there seem to have been more than 10 Void Lords invading this plane. Therefore, Sartre must strictly control the information, and must not leak the information of this plane until his own strength is sufficient. Otherwise, I will definitely be attacked by a bunch of Void Lords, and it is not the current sublord, but the Star Sea territory. High-level lords such as Lords and Moon Lords. At that time, it would be difficult to escape. Void is a place where strength is concerned, and he still understands the truth of the innocence and the guilt. The arrival of Fenrir made Sartre plan to carry out his plan of plain erosion in advance. Originally Sartre planned to wait for his own territory. Let's talk about it later. But now, he is ready. The so-called plain erosion plan is that Sartre intends to make sacrifices to induce the will of the void, so that the void will erode the northern wilderness. Complete to actually deal with the king of this plane, he can't fight in his home field. Only in the void can Satyr's strength be maximized. Soon, Sartre issued an order to Tessus to give him the blueprint of the void sacrifice altar, so that he could build it as soon as possible. There is another important reason why Sartre let Tessus lead the northern wasteland as the nominal lord of the northern wasteland. He needed a titular lord of the northern wilderness and used his name to make sacrifices. Only in this way can Bai Huang be brought into the embrace of the void before the will of the plane of the sky can react. Although Satyr can avoid the gaze of the will of the plane, once the sacrifice circle is activated, it is equivalent to exposing himself to the plane. Under the will, it can be expelled by the will of the plane before the summoning can be completed. Tessus is very efficient. After all, he is now the lord of the northern wilderness, and his will is executed the fastest here. In a few days, the altar was ready. The altar was built in the center of Baihuang city. Tessus didn't know what it was for, but he didn't dare to have any doubts about Sartre's order, which he carried out very succinctly. The whole of the altar is made of stone, and it is covered with mysterious and strange runes. These are all spells composed of void words. And the sacrifices needed for the entire altar have long been available, and yes, the corpses after the previous war. Except for the believers of Tessus who were taken away and buried, the rest of the corpses were uniformly buried in a wasteland outside the city. Sartre had already installed a small altar there, connected to the main altar in the city. Now Sartre has to do first, it is to use the mark of one's own void lord as a coordinate, and use a large number of flesh and blood corpses to attract the attention of the void, then let Tessus lead the will of the void in the name of the lord of the northern wilderness. Finally, Satyr drives the sacrifice runes to sacrifice the Baihuang. Let the void invade and devour the northern wilderness. Once successful, the land in the northern wasteland will be transformed into a void environment. At this time, Sartre can use the northern wilderness as the home field to gradually devour the entire plain. Of course, the reason why this can be done is because the current Tessus is the nominal lord of the northern wilderness and is recognized by the vast majority of people. This also makes the will of the plane acquiesce him as the lord of the northern wilderness, although Tessus has not yet condensed the priesthood of the lord of the northern wilderness. When everything was ready, Sartre summoned Tessus. This time, Sartre was ready to tell him who he really was. Tessus, do you know the void plane? Sartre spoke slowly towards Tessus. This, subordinates don't know. Yes, although Tessus has survived for hundreds of years, but due to his low strength, and this plane has not been threatened by the void before. I don't know, it's normal. Thesis, what would you do if I told you that I came from a different plane and the purpose was to invade this plane? After Sartre finished speaking, there was no expression on his face, and he looked at Tessus. Tessus had long guessed whether Sartre came from another world. At first Tessus thought Satyr was the resurrection of the sleeping god, but as time went on, the strength shown by Sartre made Tessus a little incredible. Coupled with the weird troupe lair, Tess already had the answer in his heart. After all, as a god, although he does not know the existence of the void plane, it is not that he has never seen creatures from other worlds. It's just that he has seen alien creatures that seem to have strayed into the plane of the sky. These creatures were basically found and suppressed by the will of the plane as soon as they arrived here, and drove the native creatures of the plane to obliterate them. He had never seen anything like Sartre. And judging from the current situation, Sartre doesn't seem to plan to hide himself. Tessus glanced at Sartre secretly, and saw that he had been looking at him. An invisible pressure hung over him, and he knew he had to make a choice. After pondering for a while, Tessus said to Sartre, the subordinate is willing to die for the master, even if he invades the plane. Tessis agreed very decisively, because there was no way. He was imprinted by Sartre with the void mark. Life and death have long been out of his hands, and his current strength and power are getting bigger and bigger. During the period of following Sartre, Tessis not only reached the pinnacle of demigods in strength, but also became the master of the northern wilderness that he could not imagine before. He didn't want to give up all this. Very good, Tessis, you have made the right choice. I will recite these words on the altar tomorrow in the name of the Lord of the Northern Wilderness. Sartre's heart moved, and a message passed into Tessis's mind through the imprint. Tessis accepted it, and said simply, Master, your subordinates understand. You must act according to your instructions. When Tessis decided to take refuge in the void, the next thing to do was straightforward. There is no confusion inside. You ask Sartre why he believes so much that Tessis will do as he orders. It's very simple, the void mark's effect is much stronger than imagined. If Tessis has other thoughts, Sartre can directly control his body, including his soul, and he can also use the will of the void at that time. Finally, the time came, and the entire Baihuang city was gathered in the center of the city, all kneeling in front of the altar to pray. Tessis had already stood on the altar, and Satur appeared in front of the believers of Tess for the first time. In the past, the believers of Tessis had only heard that their gods had taken refuge in His Majesty a true God, but they had never seen Satur. They looked at this young man with long horns on the top of his head and black eyes and skin. Although it looks ordinary, when you feel it carefully, you can feel a powerful majesty and an unparalleled pressure from him. This kind of feeling has never been felt even in his own respected gods. They didn't dare to have any thoughts, and their bodies knelt down on the ground more devoutly. Recite the teachings of Tessis and pray to him. Feeling the power of belief from the believers soaring, Tessis took a deep breath. Started to read the words that Sartre passed on to him. The omnipotent void, you are so powerful. You are everywhere, you are the terminator of all things, and you are the creator of all things. The humble I am praying here, I hope you will set your sights on this place. This is the void prayer, as long as there are enough sacrifices, plus void items. You can summon a trace of the projected will of the void. Don't think it's just a trace of projected will, you must know that this trace of will can easily break through the will barrier of the secondary plane and erode the plane. In line with Tess' prayer, the Lord's mark on Sartre's hand lit up, and he activated the small altar outside the city. In an instant, the cemetery outside the city was shrouded in a thin layer of grey light, and beneath the surface, the buried corpses seemed to be eroded by some kind of force, and all began to decompose. In a short while, all the tens of thousands of corpses turned into a grey energy and attacked the center of the city. And because the corpse disappeared, a huge hole was created in the cemetery. Sartre saw the grey light energy coming, and immediately opened the main altar. And motioned Tess to continue reading the words just now. Tessis hurriedly continued to recite the void prayer. With the prayers of Tessis, the clouds above the entire Baihuang city began to twist, and it seemed that something was attracted. This means that the will of the void has been attracted, and Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com is breaking through the plane barrier. And the sky also began to sound with bursts of roaring thunder, the clouds appeared brilliant colors along with the thunder, and an invisible pressure enveloped the city. This is the plane will of the King Sun plane that felt the invasion and woke up. The believers under the altar had never seen such a bizarre celestial phenomenon, and they all acted in terror, but they did not dare to move, and could only pray to the gods more devoutly. Seeing this, Sartre immediately stood on the main altar, and let Tessis stand aside to continue praying. Taking advantage of the confrontation of the two wills, he launched a sacrifice, and the grey energy turned into a beam of light and rushed into the distorted clouds. Boom! The thunder in the sky became louder, and a strong wind blew in the city. The thunder was accompanied by the roar of the strong wind. Sartre knew that the will of the plane was already angry. I saw a lightning strike directly towards the altar. This thunder and lightning is full of destructive aura. If Sartre is hit, it can be imagined that it must be wiped out. You must know that although Sartre is the master of the plane, this is not his home court. His strength was greatly reduced, and he couldn't bear this kind of power at all. Tessis was so frightened that he almost collapsed to the ground. However, the expression on Sartre's face did not change in the slightest. He knew that the lightning could not hit him. As the Lord of the Void and the host of the altar, the will of the Void would not damage him in the slightest. Sure enough, the lightning struck halfway, was directly twisted, and then disappeared. At this time, the abnormal situation here also attracted the attention of many gods in this plane. Soon, 14 shining figures appeared in the sky, with animal shapes and human shapes. Judging from the breath they exude, they should be the 14 third-level true gods on this plane. As soon as the 14 true gods of the King Ri plane arrived here, they received the information of the plane's will. Kill Tessis and Satyr at all costs, and destroy the altar. Whoever succeeds will be rewarded handsomely. But they didn't act rashly, not because they didn't want the reward, but because they didn't dare. The current Sartre has erupted with the power of the 4th level, and in this case, it is the level of the King of Gods. This is not something they can solve. As time went by, Sartre felt that the breath of the Void was getting stronger and stronger, and the resistance of the will of the plane was getting weaker and weaker. At this moment, the sky suddenly sounded like the prayers of countless people. The words of prayer gradually became clear. It seems that some kind of existence is beginning to wake up. At this time, the faces of the true gods in the sky began to change. There was fear, reverence, and some relief. They knew that it was the king who had awakened. They had never faced the king level before, so they didn't know the gap between the true and the king. They have been waiting for the God King to recover without doing anything. The reason for fear is that the awakening of the King of Gods means that they are no longer able to dominate this plane as they were before. In the past, in order to compete for believers, they fought a lot, and many places on the plane were destroyed by their wars. When the King of Gods wakes up, they will definitely be punished, and may even be knocked down from their positions. Just when the hearts of the gods were extremely complicated, the voice of prayer had reached its climax. You are the king of the gods, you rule the world. Come back, the eternal king seos. With the end of the prayer, a figure in the sky slowly became clear, and gradually condensed a purple clansman lying flat. As the body condensed, the body's eyes began to open. A dazzling light radiated from his eyes, until the eyes were fully opened, and the light from the eyes shot into the sky, stirring the clouds. The entire space above is somewhat distorted. After a while, the body turned from lying down to standing, and the light from the eyes began to fade. The God King Seos of the plane of the sky has officially awakened. Sartre also carefully observed Seos, only to see his youthful face, wearing a golden feather coat. There is an indescribable beauty. As the king of the plane, he is the most perfect person in this plane. He exudes an aura that makes people want to worship. When he stood there, all the true gods around him were eclipsed, as if the whole world was focused on him. From him, Sartre felt the breath of the master of the same plane, and he must have refined the heart of the plane. Sartre thought he was just the son of the plane, the chosen one of the plane of the sky. Unexpectedly, he actually refined the heart of the plane and became the master of the plane. Although both of these situations can break through the boundaries of the secondary plane and reach the 4th level. But the strength is completely different. Listening to the title, you know that one is the son of the plane and the other is the master of the plane. The difference in one word has completely different meanings. A position is under the will of the plane, driven by the will of the plane. One is the master of the plane, and the entire plane runs according to his mind. Fortunately, because of the sacrifice of the altar, Baihuang City has been temporarily out of the control of Seos, otherwise it will be the master of the plane. He can directly control this space and suppress Sartre. The will of the void has broken through the plane barrier, and the transformation of the void has begun. Alienation is spreading with Baihuang City as the center, and the bodies of the residents in Baihuang City have also begun to change. Many people have scales or horns on their bodies. As a member of the presiding sacrifice, Tessa's began to swell and expand, and his muscles became stronger. The fangs on both sides of the mouth have grown out of the mouth. Looking at the sharp teeth, it is estimated that no one wants to be bitten, and bone spurs have grown on the tail. Overall it feels like a perfect killing weapon. Grim but full of strange beauty. The transformation of the void is for better killing, so alienation is basically aimed at lethality and adaptability. You must know that the environment in the void is very harsh, and there is no way to survive in the void without sufficient strength and adaptability. I didn't expect my face to be targeted by the Void Lord. Sios looked at Sartre with majestic eyes and said. Obviously, as the master of the plane, he still understands the existence of the void. Sartre wasn't timid either, even though this was their home court. God King Sios, right? I've admired him for a long time, but I still have to decide on this plane. Humph. Even if you are a Void Lord, you are just the lowest lord, and this is my home court. You are ready to die. Said, a ray of light lit up in his hand, turned into a scepter, and charged towards Sartre. Alienation has already begun, and his strength cannot stop the erosion of the void. Sios must fight quickly and destroy the altar. Use this to interrupt the alienation, and then find a way to clean up the power of the void. Sartre also showed no signs of weakness. Baihuang City has been transformed into a void, and the void is still expanding. Here, his strength can finally exert its greatest strength. When Sartre raised his hand, he said Void Mantra Flame, and saw a black flame appear in his hand. Pushing his hand up, the flames shot towards Sios, who was swooping in. The flame seemed to be the size of a human head, but Sios felt a deadly threat from the flame, and he sensed that the flame could not be avoided, so he could only continue. He quickly stopped sprinting, and smashed the black fire with the scepter in his hand, only to see a flash of fire, and the fireball exploded directly, scattering in all directions. The god of the mountains Moog, who was watching the battle not far away, did not hurry to dodge, and was splashed by a trace of black fire. The whole body was instantly ignited, and Moog quickly released a shield with divine power, trying to protect himself, but the flame was attached to the divine shield, and it burned even more vigorously. Seeing this, the accompanying rain quickly created water and sprinkled it on Moog's body, but it didn't have the slightest effect. In a wailing cry, Moog was burnt to ashes, and the of the mountains fell. At the same time, the statue of the god of the mountains also began to collapse, and there was a sound of crying in the country of mountains. Seeing this, the other true gods felt a chill in their hearts, and immediately stayed away from the battlefield here. In a battle at the level of a king, they don't even have the qualifications to watch, and the slightest aftermath can make them fall. Sios didn't have time to save Moog. The black fire summoned by the Void Mantra was smashed by his scepter, but part of the black fire was attached to the scepter and continued to burn. Sios immediately used the plane authority to directly use space stripping against the flames, and banished the flames to other spaces. This black fire made Sios involuntarily cheer up, and the Lord of the Void really lived up to his reputation. Even the weakest lord can still use such terrifying skills. He didn't rush over recklessly this time, but first blessed himself with multiple layers of shields. Then holding the scepter, he cautiously attacked Sartre. Sartre didn't want to fight him close quarters. Judging from the appearance of Sios, he should be a warrior type. And Sartre has always been practicing towards the mage's side, so let Fenrir do the melee combat. Fenrir, who had long been unable to hold back his desire to kill, rushed to Sios immediately after receiving the order. The two sides started a hand-to-hand battle. Although Fenrir had no weapons, his fangs and claws were no less than any weapons. Sartre was looking for an opportunity to cast spells. The battle between the two sides began to get heated. Although it was a two-nun battle, as the master of the plane of the sky, Ceos could replenish his energy by absorbing the power of the plane at any time. However, the transformation of void will is still going on, which also forces Ceos to retreat continuously. After all, fighting in the void, he couldn't absorb energy. And the combat effectiveness of Fenrir and Satyr in the void will be a level. The battle followed the expansion of the void, all the way to the border area of the northern wilderness. Satyr's purpose has also been achieved. When the void transformation is successful, Satyr's reward will also arrive. A pillar of energy poured directly into Sartre in the sky of the northern desert. Sartre couldn't help but let out a comfortable moan. This energy is prepared by the will of the void to reward those who develop territory for the void, and it can enhance the strength without any side effects. Originally, Sartre had just entered the 4th level not long ago, but this energy directly raised him to the peak of the 4th level. This reward is not unreasonably rich. You must know that some lords sacrifice the entire secondary planes may not have such a big improvement. But now, Sartre only sacrificed the northern wilderness, accounting for 1/10 of the entire plane. But this award really made Sartre a little excited. Also, a plane with abundant resources and complete rules like the King Ri plane is rare. This sudden change made Ceos a little flustered. Originally, he could match the power of 2 planes, and even had the upper hand. Originally, he planned to use up Sartre's stamina and energy in this way, and then take them down. But now, the energy infusion of the void has broken the balance. Looking at the aura of Sartre, it is estimated that a single person can already match himself, plus a wolf of the same 4th level. Ceos already had the idea of retreating, and now his strength is no longer dominant. Although he still controls most of the plane, the level of void energy is too high. Relying on this 1/10 of the land, Sartre is no longer afraid of Ceos. Sartre watched Ceos retreat while fighting. Yu read www.yuyugonshu.com with a gesture of fleeing at any time, and knew what he was thinking. But Sartre couldn't let him escape. After knowing that Ceos was the master of the plane, he decided that he must stay at all costs. As long as you kill him, the heart of the plane will inevitably drop, then you can directly control the plane by swallowing the heart of the plane. As long as he sacrifices this plane again, he will definitely be promoted to level 5. Then give the plane cube enough soul to get the 6th level arm's nest. Satyr can disdain and stimulate the Void Lord, and even a weaker Star Lord. With a loud bang, Fenrir's claws collided with Ceos' scepter. However, it is clear that Fenrir's strength is inferior to that of OSS. Fenrir's entire body was smashed and flew out. Seeing this opportunity, Ceos turned around and tore open the space, intending to escape first. Sartre on the side had expected it, his strength just soared, and the energy of the void filled his body. Using the void mantra to read to Ceos, in the name of void, imprison space. This should be put before. Saying this complete sentence with the void mantra will drain the energy of the Satyr, and even deplete the source of life. This loss of life is permanent. In better understanding terms, this is the loss of the upper limit of life, and the things that increase the upper limit of life are precious and rare. But now, Sartre feels that his energy is enough for him 3 or 4 times without consuming his life. Leaving this aside, when Ceos wanted to tear open the space to escape, Sartre used the void mantra to imprison the space. This void mantra directly locks the space around Ceos. Ceos found that his space power was completely ineffective. Sartre imprisoned the space and cut off Ceos' back path. This made Ceos extremely angry. Damn! You guys actually want to kill them all. Since that's the case, I'll fight with you. Seeing this, Sartre knew that Ceos, who had no hope of escaping in front of him, was about to start desperately. The dog jumped over the wall in a hurry. What's more, as the master of the plane, Satyr must be careful about Ceos' ultimate move. Fenrir had already climbed up and roared at Ceos. At the same time, Satyr kept using spells towards Ceos. The Satyr Club doesn't have many skills, except for the Void Mantra, the common void spells are only Lava Fireball, Corrupted Arrow, Curse, and Void Summon. Mantra of the Void consumes too much and cannot be used as a regular skill. Sartre has always used so many spells back and forth, and it is true that spells spend less time. The Void Summoning Satyr has always been useless, mainly because this spell can only summon void creatures one level lower than oneself, and the time is limited, so the effect is too small. Unless you use the Void Mantra to strengthen your summons. This way of strengthening is to replace some of the words in the incantation with Void Mantra and read it out. In this way, the effect of the spell can be strengthened, and the void creatures of the same level or even higher can be summoned. But with the urine nature of void creatures, it is very likely that they will hit you in the first place. Sartre dare not bet his luck. Sartre himself doesn't have any equipment, so he can strengthen his combat power. Speaking of which, Sartre had to envy Sios. The scepter in his hand was definitely the best among the secondary equipment. Classification of equipment: secondary, low level, intermediate, advanced, ultimate. Even the black fire summoned by the previous void mantra didn't burn out. It seems that the material is definitely made of source iron. Speaking of strange objects in the plane, this is also an important basis for measuring the value of a plane. Original iron is generally only produced on those planes with sufficient sources of planes, and it is possible to produce them in places where the planes have the strongest source power, and the output is generally very small. Thinking about Sartre's wilderness plane, let alone source iron, it doesn't even have fine gold next time. Not to mention this, Sios, who was blocked from retreating, finally started to use his trump cards. I saw that he grabbed the scepter and pointed forward, the plane source power surged all over his body, and said continuously in his mouth, I said, my next attack on the enemy cannot be avoided. I said, my attack, the enemy will not be able to block. Then he threw the scepter in his hand vigorously and shot at Fenrir. Seeing this, Fenrir wanted to turn around and dodge, but found that no matter where he ran, the scepter must be behind him and quickly approached him. There was no way, Fenrir could only forcibly slap the scepter with his claws. However, the scepter was like a sharp spear, piercing directly through his claws and through his body. A hole the size of a fist was left in his body and paw. This attack directly knocked Fenrir to the ground. He struggled to get up, but this serious injury made him slump to the ground with a howling wolf howling. Fortunately, it wasn't his heart that was shot, otherwise, the blow might have killed him. This is the great prophecy. With the order of the master of the plane, consume the rules and techniques of the source of the plane. If you want to ask why such powerful abilities were not used earlier or why they were not killed by the rules directly, then you are thinking too much. You must know that Sios is now consuming the source of the plane. If he wants to kill an existence of the same level directly, it is estimated that he will not necessarily kill the source he got from the plane. Originally, this is just a secondary plane, and the combat power of the fourth level is beyond the limit of the secondary plane. He can only use the Great Prophecy as an auxiliary means, that is, the two Great Prophecies just now have consumed a quarter of Sios' plane origin. These plane origins are all drawn from the heart of planes by Sios, and he usually does not dare to use a little more origin. You must know that directly extracting the source from the heart of the plane will deplete the plane, and a little more extraction may make some parts of the plane become barren. How do you think the northern wilderness came from? Sios, when he was promoted to the God King, extracted the source of the plane in order to forge the divine weapon, and created this vast and barren land. P.S. Crystallization of the plane is the exclusive method of the Lord of the Void Plane, and it forms crystals by collecting the source of the plane overflowing. The native gods of this lower plane have no such means. Satyr took advantage of Sios's attack, and there was a loophole in his defense, and he took the opportunity to use the enhanced version of the Void Mantra Corrosion Arrow on him. The shield on Sios' body flashed, but it only hindered it a little. The summoned grey corrosive arrow hit Sios' body. The severe pain caused Sios to scream, and the powerful void energy was madly corroding his body. Ceos gathered his own divine power to stop the spread of corrosion. But obviously, he thinks too much. The void energy encounters divine power, but it corrodes faster. Seeing this, Ceos was heartbroken, and read to the wound on his chest. I said, I am the king of gods, and time will stand still because of me. In an instant, Ceos felt that all the plane origin he had accumulated had been drawn and nothing was left. However, the wound on his chest is not getting worse. To be precise, the time of the wound has stopped. Judging from Ceos's induction, it can only last for 3 minutes. The power of time is not so easy to use, and Ceos has really started to work hard. You must know that this time stagnation is only temporary. Once the effect is over, the stagnant time will be returned immediately, which means that his injury will be more serious. However, Ceos has no choice, he has to do it. Now he also let go of his hands and feet, and directly began to forcibly extract the source of the plane from the heart of the plane. As for the fact that the plane will be destroyed, this situation cannot be taken care of now. His life is gone, and he still cares whether the plane is damaged. Ceos recalled his scepter and continued to release the great prophecy at Satyr. This was a desperate attempt. I said, my enemy will not be able to escape my attack. I said, my attack will pierce through everything. I said, my strength will be raised to the highest level. With the use of these 3 great prophecies, most of the plane origin of the King Sun plane was forcibly extracted. Disasters are happening all over the plane. The country of rain, the country where the of rain keeps raining all year round in order to show his divine power, ushered in the largest earthquake in history, and countless people were buried under collapsed houses. The kingdom of Poseidon is the most unfortunate. His followers are basically located on islands and seasides. The volcanoes on the seabed begin to erupt, and the tsunami hits. In just an instant, the sea god George, who lost almost all his followers, fell directly, which is also the sad part of believing in God. Lost a lot of planes of origin, causing many rules to be disrupted, and the entire plane ushered in the darkest era, but those true gods have nothing to do. As the initiator of the disaster, Ceos has already prepared his strongest attack. Whether it is life or death depends on this. Not to be outdone, Sartre obviously had to take the final blow. Without any hesitation, Sartre immediately began to chant the incantation, and his body was filled with vigorous void energy. Void mantra, the fire of the void, burn everything up. Lava fireball. Satyr exhausted all his void energy, and also extracted part of the source of the wild plane. Use the void mantra to cast the spell Lava Fireball. This spell, strengthened by the blessing of the void, condensed a fireball with a diameter of 1 meter that was churning with black magma. Both sides began to charge up the last and strongest skill. Ceos turned into a dazzling light and charged towards Satyr. Sartre also raised the lava fireball and collided with Ceos. Boom! Boom! A huge sound blasted with a powerful energy wave centered on them, and a huge pothole appeared around them in an instant. The energy of both sides has been raised to the maximum. Ceos' scepter was blessed with piercing ability, piercing the lava fireball bit by bit, stabbing towards Satyr's body. As time went by bit, the scepter Risart got closer and closer. Just when Lysat's eyes were less than a centimeter. Suddenly, Ceos let out a scream, and 3 minutes were up. With the release of Ceos' power, the lava fireball blew directly on him. Clang! Clang! The sound of a bell seemed to come from the sky, as if to bid farewell to the death of the god king, Ceos. Boom! The thunder started, and the red rain fell instantly. Heaven and earth are in grief, and the earth is full of blood. This king who has been in the plane for countless years has fallen. Sartre also slumped to the ground, knowing that this last blow, he used up all his energy. Sartre lay on the ground to recover his strength. Now on the battlefield, no one dares to approach this place. He could relax and recover. Sartre absorbed the void energy with all his strength, and 10 minutes passed. He was finally able to get up and walk, In the distance, Fenrir's blood had already flowed all over the place, and it was no longer enough. Sartre doesn't want to lose the only heroic unit currently under his command. He walked over to Sios' body. His corpse was covered with corroded potholes, the exterior was burnt black, and there was a faint smell of burnt corpses. There are 3 radiant objects floating above the corpse, which are the heart of the plane, the godhead, and the god-king priesthood of Sios, and his scepter is also dropped next to the corpse. He waved them into the Lord's space, grabbed the body of Sios, and dragged it to Fenrir. UU reading www.uugonshu.com. As the wild wolf was summoned by divinity, the flesh and blood of the gods is the best supplement. As for the original corrosive energy on the corpse, it has long since disappeared, even if it is a little residual. As the wild wolf, Fenrir, who belongs to the void arm, can ignore these. When Fenrir saw the corpse of Sios in front of him, he bowed feebly to Sartre, and then began to chew, and the sound of chewing sounded. As he continued to devour flesh and blood, the wounds on Fenrir's body continued to grow and heal. Fenrir bit faster and faster. It didn't take long for all the corpses to be eaten up, not even a single bone was left. Fenrir's injury has fully recovered, and even his strength feels much stronger. Fenrir, who had recovered from his injury, walked up to Sartre, lowered his head and said, "Master, I feel that I have found my own evolutionary method. As long as I continue to devour gods, I can continue to evolve and become stronger." It seems that Fenrir will become a god killer in the future. It's not easy, this time it's really a near-death situation. If Sios' injury occurred later in the final blow, the result might be the exact opposite. But now the victor is Sartre. So the next time is the moment to collect the loot. Sartre planned to return to Baihuang City first, wait for his recovery, and then devour the heart of the plane of the sky. Then clean up the gods of the King Sun plane. The plane cube needs a soul. After killing Sios, his soul has been collected. Because of the high level of Sios, plus the divine soul he had saved before. Now Sartre is still more than 100 levels of divine soul. Sartre did the math, about 3/3 level true spirits would be enough.